Welcome to Monday Night Politics, the forum presented to you by the Dallas Examiner newspaper for now the last dozen years all of a sudden. Here to enlighten you on and make you aware, familiar with candidates running tonight's session for State Representative District 113. Tonight we have with us the incumbent, Retta Andrews Bowers. Good evening, ma'am, and her challenger, Uduak Nkanga.
Yes.
Correct?
Uduak.
Yes, sir. Uduak Nkanga. Thank you so much for your being here tonight. We'll start off. Representative Bowers, we had a conversation earlier with candidates for District 100. And I was trying to, none of them serve in the legislature, and I was trying to get them to get some sense of the volatility, if you will, of the current legislature with the governor and the lieutenant governor and the antics that they're put through. So give us some sense in your opening statement, if you will, of just what that thing is down there in Austin.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. O'Neill, and thank you, Molly Belt. I'm in the Dallas Examiner. I am State Representative Retta Andrews Bowers. I currently represent House District 113, and I'm seeking a third term. And I am thankful for the question that you asked, because down in the House chamber, it is very volatile and aggressive. And you are simply trying your best to represent your district and your community in a situation that is highly intense. People are not working together as well as we used to. When I came in my freshman term, this situation was looked at as kumbaya. It is that no more. It is a house divided that we are working hard to repair. I want to say that. I saw in my first term and in my second term party line votes. And that is the hardest thing to witness. We are 83 to 67, and that number, the 67, is decreasing as members are leaving the Texas House. With that, as I said, am in my second term, and I currently serve in leadership as the Vice Chair of Homeland Security and Public Safety. I am also the Democratic Chair of the Dallas delegation. I serve as the Secretary of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus, and I as well serve on the House Democratic Caucus Steering and Policy Committee. So with all that said, I do everything I can to represent the district I was sent there to represent. I am effective in the House in that I am able to work across the aisle, and I have walked a fine line on a tightrope, if you will, because the district was not a Democratic district when I got there.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Nakanga. 2 minutes for opening statements.
First and foremost, I want to thank y'all for having me here. Thank you for this forum, and thank you for the platform. My name is Uduak Nakanga, and I'm running for a Texas House seat, District 113, as you may know. First and foremost, why did I decide to run? I decided to run because I'm fighting for something bigger than myself. I come from immigrant parents, born and raised in South Garland, one of 6 kids. I've been community involved since I was 15 years old. When I say 15, I'm talking about protesting, organizing, grassrooting, the full 9 yards, and I emphasize that because I never want to normalize that. I don't want 15-year-olds on the street fighting for women's rights, fighting for racial and social equity, and fighting for healthcare, the basic rights. And that's why I fight so hard still to this day. I've worked on a presidential campaign. I've served as the current president of the forming chapter of the National Congress of Black Women here in Dallas, Texas. I've worked with SLU Law School, St. Louis Law School out in Missouri, and I'm standing here in front of you as a 23-year-old black woman and telling you that the cycle stops now. I fight so hard because I'm fighting for the people who come after me. I don't want them to go through today's struggles. I don't want them to have to endure the struggles based off of today's decisions, and that's why I stand in front of you as an advocate, as an activist, as a sister, as a daughter, as someone who knew what it was like to live paycheck to paycheck, fighting for something bigger than myself. Thank you.
So stay there.
Yes, sir.
We'll go to you. So what is it about your candidacy that will change the way, or change the responses that our legislature now?
So a key thing that I noticed while we go block walking door to door is that a lot of people, they don't know who our representative is. When I go block walking and I introduce myself, they think I'm a volunteer. They get excited to see someone so young, someone so vibrant, a fresh voice, a fresh face, ready to fight with the resume that I have. Something different within my candidacy is that we have a lot, I can't emphasize that enough, a lot of young voters or a lot of young volunteers within our campaign, from the ages of 19 all the way till 25, I would say. They're getting more excited and they're getting more faith within the political process, because I think within our party we fail to put people in leaderships that actually represent the people. A lot of times while going door to door, and a lot of testimonies that we hear, a lot of people, they're not excited about voting because they're given the same thing, the same political answers. They want to see somebody who can emphasize with their stories. They want to see somebody who isn't the most polished politician. They want to see somebody who understands their struggles, who's going through their struggles, because they know if someone is going through the same struggles they are, they're going to fight harder for them. And that is me, and that is why I'm standing in front of you still to this day. I've been fighting for the last 8+ years, and I'm going to continue to fight, because I refuse, me and like many others, we refuse to bring children into a world that we know that they're going to go through the same struggles that we are currently dealing with. Enough is enough. People are sick and tired of being sick and tired. They want something new. They want something different. And that's what our candidacy brings within this campaign.
Good. Representative Bowers, ask the same question another way. Why is it critical that you be returned to District 113?
Thank you for the question. And I'm going to wait for the time clock to get right. Okay, great. Thank you for the question, Mr. O'Neill. Now is not the time for someone new. And I came here tonight to say that. The reality is it takes a long time to pass legislation in the Texas House. We've heard earlier tonight it has to get out of the House chamber, but not only does it have to do that, it has to go to the Senate, and it has to get past the lieutenant governor and the governor. It is very hard. If you, it's been said that we need a louder voice. 113 needs the voice that it has. You cannot be too loud, too left, or too right. And 113 at this point, thank goodness, based on my back, my family's, and the service of many people that have volunteered and continue to volunteer, we feel like we have the representation that's needed there. The representation that has been serving all the people, and it takes a long time to get name recognition. But I do believe that I have the name recognition in the district. The people of House District 113 want to send me back. I introduced the Crown Act in the last legislative session. In the first legislative session, passed House Bill 3435, Texas Girls in STEM Day, and we will soon celebrate that holiday again on March 1st. That is not easy work. And if I'm polished, I'm glad to be. I too came to create change. I too was marching those streets. I'm the chair, co-founding chair of the Dallas Women's March. I marched against police brutality with Next Generation Action Network. So I know what it means to be grassroots, but at some point you have to go from activist to legislator and start governing.
So we'll stay there, Representative Bowers. I've been harping on this, and I want to stay on it because I don't think people truly understand what, and selfishly, the Legislative Black Caucus is up against in the state legislature. This past session, clearly we saw voter suppression, we saw inattention to health care delivery, inattention to education funding adequately. We saw, asinine bills about CRT, that non-existent fight. And through it all, you have to somehow manage to pass or enact legislation that makes sense for your constituents.
Yes.
Tell us about that fight and why it's critical, again, that you said it's important to know the difference between an activist and a legislature. What does that mean when you're in that kind of arena?
In the chamber, Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. The chamber is, if you will, it is an arena, and it is a playing field. I said the other night, this is chess, not checkers. There has to be strategy on the floor. You have to be willing to let those votes get whipped and be whippable enough to get your vote in line with the way it should go. We have to be able to vote in blocks. But as we know, we had to use the only tool left in the tool chest and tool shed, and that was to walk off the floor. I was one of the first members to walk off the floor, proud of that and ready to go to DC and get on that plane and fight for voting rights, to stand up for our freedom to vote. Spent 40 days away from my family, and I was proud to do it, and I would do it again. When we heard CRT, I want you to tell you with critical race theory, when I saw critical race theory on the list of legislation that was going to be presented on the floor, and I saw the 1619 project, I, as a Black Texas Legislative Black Caucus member, ran around that floor, letting my colleagues know, do you all see what is coming our way? We cannot let this happen. Some of my colleagues have told me many times, this is not the time to sit down. You cannot sit down in that legislative chamber because you have to pay attention and you have to be ready. You have to know the rules in the House to figure out how to kill those bad bills. I also was able to let many people come to the State House and testify for the George Floyd Act. It was not easy to hear that type of testimony, but I knew those voices needed to be heard. So glad that I was the vice chair of Homeland Security and Public Safety. Before that, I had done a law enforcement listening series that led up to that work.
Very good. Mm-hmm. Ms. Nkanka, given that what we just heard about what that situation, why is it that energy that you talked about is the important element that we need right now?
Okay, perfect. So I want to comment on a comment that was made prior saying that right now is not the time. That brings me back to the MLK quote when he says there's no delay in progress. For so long, we're expecting change with the same approach. For so long, we've been told to get in line, to act this way and act this way, but at some point, we have to realize this is bigger than ourselves, and this is bigger than right now. As a community, I can honestly say we are always given the short end of the stick, even though we're always the ones showing up, whether it's in elections, whether it's in protesting, whether it's in fighting for equity amongst all people, we are always getting the short end of the stick. So at what point do we stop playing this game and start demanding it? At what point do we stop saying, oh, just play the game here or play the game here? It's about being bold, it's about being progressive, and it's about being unapologetically bold and unapologetically progressive. I understand that there's ways to go about things and there's ways to compromise, but we're at the point where we can't continue to compromise human rights. We can't continue to compromise voting rights, women's rights, and so forth. It's about being bold and unapologetically bold, and that's just how my approach of things, and that's what I stand on still to this day, and that's what's gotten me this far still to this day.
Okay. So, we just got gerrymandered into oblivion. So, given, again, that atmosphere down there, what is your one pressing issue that you'll pursue, and how will you get it advanced?
Okay, so, that's hard. That's a good question, though. So I would really say racial and social equity, and even though you did say one, I'm sorry, I'm going to cheat a little bit, housing and property taxes / cost of living. I'm going to merge that into one. I say that mainly because when we see our housing market, for example, affordable living. I have a friend who just had a baby and lost her job. Here in Garland, Texas, she is ranked 1,204 just to be considered for affordable housing. So I think it's with great importance to not only fund inside affordable housing, but we have to start breaking the barriers that are driving people into affordable housing. That includes the increase in property taxes, that includes this tremendous cost of living, that includes high in housing insurance and so forth. We have people who are graduating fresh out of college with bachelor's degrees and master's degrees coming out with a $40,000, $50,000 degree just to be offered, what, $14, $15 an hour? It's a big issue, and it's a big issue that we're continuing to see not only within the district but in the state of Texas itself. So I would say those are the two main priorities that I would fight for.
Okay, very good. Representative Bowers, I know you've addressed a good number of them, but if there is an issue that is pressing, that you believe when you return to office, that you'll work and spend your time on.
Well, currently across the district, and the district has changed, so thank you, Mr. O'Neill, for mentioning that. Right now, we are serving Rowlett, Garland, and Mesquite. And we had, when I was afforded the opportunity to serve this district, I came into 7 cities. Mm-hmm. We now are more condensed, we're more democratic. Went from a 51% district, Biden district, to a 59%. But I think what I want to drive home and what we've been working on in the district is really making sure that we increase the rate of vaccinated individuals with COVID-19. We have been doing pop-up clinics all across the district. We brought testing to the district early on because people were not able from our district to get down here to Fair Park. And Ellis Fieldhouse. So that is really, and I want to say that I'm a COVID survivor. I had COVID with members of my family back in December of 2020 with no vaccine. And I'm proud to be a survivor, and we have done that all over the community. So I want to make sure those dollars are spent properly and that we are making sure people have access to testing, they have access to PPE, and they have access to the vaccine. We'll continue to do that work, and that's the one thing. Other than that, I will take back to the legislature and refile the Crown Act. I will also take back to the legislature the Project Unity's Together We Dine. I take that to the legislature twice. I have done it now, and I will make sure that my colleagues are having those race-based, courageous and safe conversations so that we can make sure that we are on one, if not one accord, better accord by the time we get ready to discuss issues like critical race theory, voter suppression, and the abortion bill and things like that. We have to be able to respect one another and try to work together when we discuss those contentious issues.
So this is, I guess, the closest I would come to doing a commercial for what I do. Mm-hmm. The state of Texas spends literal billions of dollars for goods and services, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And now Texas has the largest black population among the 50 states, mm-hmm. right? And our state, in its most recent biennial report, mm-hmm. managed somehow to spend about 1% of its purchases for goods and services with black-owned businesses. Yes. That's atrocious. It's horrible. Mm. And the current legislation, the HUB bill, has no teeth. So how do we begin to get, I don't say parity, equity, how do we just get it to be fair? Yeah. Given the current environment?
That's a really difficult task, Mr. O'Neill, but we have to work hard at making sure we are unveiling those disparities and make sure that the inequity is clear and apparent. When we were in the legislature last session, prior to going back, I wrote a letter to make sure that the governor knew, sent it to the governor's office, that there are disparities, whether it's in healthcare, education, and jobs, and it's certainly minority business owners in our community, and we have to make sure that is unveiled, that is clear to the population, and that we are doing everything we can when we get those bids to make sure that we're up to par and up to scale, whether it's with contracts and consultants, so that those jobs go to our community. We have to fight for ourselves. There's nobody that's going to do it but us, and we have to stand up and be sure that we make ourselves known. We've known that the inequity was there, but we have to make it clear to a community that is trying to turn a blind eye to it. And it takes working together as a Black caucus. I know that as a Black caucus, from a chair to the rest of our caucus, we have all worked to make sure our communities are understood and completely represented when it comes to jobs and small business owners, when it comes to health care and the disparities there. Some of that was mentioned earlier tonight. When it comes to education and what is not working for our students. We know that right now there is a severe and high gap in education. And that also is going to go to infrastructure. I have to mention broadband. I have to mention the access that we don't have. So we have to stand up and make it clear.
Ms. Nakanga, you mentioned equity in your earlier comment, and again, if I can be so bold, I would say that achieving some level of economic fairness will provide our communities with the resources to begin addressing some of the other issues. So I'm going to say that fundamental to me, particularly, is solving the economic disparities, and then we can address those others. So how will you, again, given the backdrop that our state spends 1% in a state that's 15% Black?
So to answer that question, the main thing with equity in itself, we have to go back to the communities. We have to make sure that we're supporting these local businesses. We've got to make sure that we're utilizing our platforms to highlight these local businesses, especially the businesses within our community. I will say this, that I believe that within the Black community, during COVID in particular, that a lot of Black-owned businesses were disproportionately affected compared to other businesses. And so to go back to the drawing boards, to answer your question, the main point when it comes to like fixing equity and fixing, making sure that these Black-owned businesses are staying afloat, making sure that we're supporting these Black-owned businesses is going back into the community, like I said before, in outreach, and making sure we are supporting our local Black-owned businesses and so forth. So that's my answer to you.
Okay. So we've talked about economics. We've talked about redistricting, kind of brushed up against it, educational disparities, healthcare disparities. But we haven't talked about, and this is just for asking you to get out on a limb and offer an opinion. We have an attorney general and a governor who brag about the number of times they've sued the federal government.
Yeah.
And lose, wasting taxpayer money for talking points or for points with their base. How do we again, these are folks that you're going to have to interact with.
Yeah.
Talk to us about how you'll make some sense of the madness in Austin.
Okay, so the main thing is our approach. One thing about the GOP, they are far from dumb. They're very, very, very intelligent. They're very, very strategic. Something that we lack within the Democratic Party is not only failure to hold each other accountable, but there's a division, whether we like to acknowledge it or not. We have people who are progressives. We have people who are just like, hey, we've seen so much, done so much, let's just go in there and let's just change our approach. And then we have people who are more of like the moderates. They're more, we have to play it fair, we have to play it by the game, we have to make sure we do A, B, and C. I think coming together as a Democratic Party on a common agenda will be the first point for real change. I do believe that our approach and things do need to change. If we want different results, we can't continue to go about it by the same way. If what we have been doing hasn't been working, then why not go about it in a different way? So our approach of things and the way that we basically approach the GOP within our issues and policies that we're trying to stand forth is the main thing that I will say can honestly change and alter our current ways.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Well, Rep, you've been in that salt mine, so to speak. How do we fight that?
Well, I think the real way that we fight that is making sure we protect our gains and we get more Democrats down there. Because as we were in last session, we're 83 to 67, very hard, volatile, unbalanced situation to be in. You cannot make things work just by being loud or going in and saying you want to make change. You have to, I applaud the people that have been on this stage before me that said they will come in and be quiet and observe. In my first session, I had to be quiet, I had to observe, I had to learn how things are done in the State House to achieve the things that I did. Proud day, as I said, when House Bill 3435 was made law. And for ever and a day, it will always be a holiday and always be celebrated in the state of Texas when I'm long gone. There's no way that I could have come back and in a second term risen to leadership and been appointed as vice chair. I also serve on the House Committee on Natural Resources, and Local and Consent Calendars, which is another power committee. Second time to serve on Local and Consent Calendars. That is a committee that makes sure bills are passed to impact the people at home. Partly why I asked for that committee again. I proudly serve House District 113. I'm committed to the people in the district, and I will certainly go back and continue to do what I have. And I will continue to learn. I can't say that I know it all. I don't know it all, but I'm proud to serve, and I will continue being the legislator that the community is proud to have in House District 113.
So, I thank you for that. We're going to go to 2-minute closing statements.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'm thankful once again to have the opportunity to stand before you, to have a chance to communicate with people in the district and outside the district. I stand before you as state representative. When I moved with my family 21, almost 22 years ago to House District 113, no way in my mind did I want to be or did I plan to become the representative for our district. It is a proud moment to say that when I ran the first time in 2016, students that I had in the classroom when they were in kindergarten were already able to vote for me. That's my son's graduating class of 2016. In 2018, they said, Rep Bowers, we got you and we're ready to send you back. As of Saturday, I had people in the district putting signs out on their own, people that are dialing on my behalf, walking daily on my behalf, people that see me in my shirt just in our neighborhood Target or in stores in Garland and say, hey, I voted for you last time and I'm gonna do it again. People that are elated after the lines were redrawn that they either still have me or they got me now. And I want the people of House District 113 to know that you have me. I'm committed to serving you. I will continue serving to the best of my ability. It is a job that I do every day for the constituents of House District 113. There's not one day that I awaken and do not awaken with them on my mind, nor do I take them down to Austin with them on my mind. And so I applaud anyone that challenges me. I thank you for the challenge, but I believe the constituency of House District 113 is happy and ready to send me back to the Texas House of Representatives for a third term. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nakanga.
So I'm going to end with this. In order for us to actually see real change, we need to change our approach of things. As I said and stated before, I don't have a voting record, but I have a service record. I've been in the community for 8+ years. I know what it's like. I'm living in there still to this day as a working class resident in South Garland. I'm hearing the stories that my neighbors are going through. I'm hearing the stories that people within the district are going through. It is more about being placed in a position that you can emphasize with the people and their stories and their struggles. It puts you in a position to where makes you want to fight harder, makes me want to fight harder because I'm going through the same thing that they are going through. Since the beginning, I've said, as I said earlier before, I'm not polished. I'm not the best speaker. I may not have all the right answers, but I have the work ethic. I have the heart. I have the drive. And I have the motivation each and every day to continue to fight for something bigger than myself. So many people in my age group, still to this day, they don't even want to bring kids into this world because it's gotten so bad. They know that they're going to go through the same struggles that they're going through. So it's about fighting for something bigger than ourselves, even when the odds are against us, even when our back is against the wall. It's about being the representative that our community, not only our community needs, but our community knows, hey, even though the odds were against you, you still had our back. Even though the odds were against you, you didn't fold. Even though the odds were against you, you still stood up, you still stood 10 toes down strong and stood what you believed in and stood for what the community believed in. And that's what I have, and that's what I continue to have. And that's what I plan to bring, not only this fresh face, but a new approach and louder voice and an unapologetic, bolder voice that not only 113 needs, but just in general. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here. And if you want more information, please visit uduakfortexas.com. God bless.
Thank you so much. The challenger, Uduak Nkanga, thank you so much. Incumbent Representative Retta Andrews Bowers, thank you so much for your attendance tonight.